I'm just delighted to welcome from her friend's kitchen in LA, California, Jessie Sheehan. Welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you for having me all the way from the West Coast. I never thought I would hear myself say something like that since I'm an East Coast girl, but I do happen to find myself in Los Angeles right now.
Well, I know you're in the midst of a multi-city book tour, and it's both some of it's live and some of it's virtual like ours, but we're just delighted that you could fit us into your schedule, and you'll be one of our featured authors at our summer 24th Sharon summer book signing, which is Friday, August 5th, 5:30 to 7:30. Yeah, and obviously the new book is what brings you on tour, but you have a whole series of interesting cookbooks in your past and cooking experiences and all kinds of, you look at things from so many different angles, both as a writer and a cook and as a recipe designer, that maybe we'd love to, we'll hope to hear a lot more about that this evening.
100%. Happy to talk about all of it, because even though all the books are very different, they're all, although this one is the most me, they all have parts of me in them.
Oh, cool. That's great. Well, we're looking forward to hearing more about you and what you do with that you.
Great.
Just a quick note to participants. Usually the format is we'll have a presentation, and tonight will be even more special. And then if you have questions, you can send them to me in the chat, and I will read them and convey them on to our guest. And we can kind of see how things go for time. Generally, we'll like to get the presentation going and kind of think about your questions, or just go ahead and put them in, and then I'll put them into the chat box, and then I'll read them as it all seems appropriate. So Jessie, I know that even though you are in LA, that you are currently a Brooklyn girl and being a part-time resident of Sharon, Connecticut as well. And this is, you really just have such an interesting history, and I don't want to take up too much time with it, but I love the idea of your first cookbook being based on cooking brochures.
Icebox cakes.
Yeah. And your other, I was thinking the vintage baking book.
Yep.
Yeah. But I don't know if you want to tell us anything about your own kind of journey to become an author, or if you mostly want to.
Sure. No, I'll do a quick journey just to lure people in, so they get extra excited for what I'm about to make, which is this beautiful strawberry sheet cake. It's a super easy peasy cake, because this entire book, Snackable Bakes, is all easy peasy recipes. But honestly, I didn't start out as an easy peasy baker. I started out as a baker who knew nothing about baking and had to learn everything. And that was career number 3. So it's not like it happened when I was 10 years old or even 5 years old at my grandmother's apron strings. It happened after I was already a mom with 2 little kids.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, as I ask people not to do, but is it true that you were really actually trained as a lawyer?
Oh, 100%. And before that, trained, if there is such a thing as training, to be an actor. So I was an actress, then I was a lawyer. Now I'm a cookbook writer. I got very lucky with my first baking job, which was in a bakery where literally I was sort of taught. I sort of just begged to be taught everything that the people who owned the bakery and worked there knew, because I knew nothing. And why I sort of lucked out, because the guys who ran this particular bakery started writing their own cookbooks while I was an employee. And they needed someone to test their recipes and develop their recipes and help them with those books. And that's how I was introduced to cookbooks. Like, I didn't really have this idea that, like, oh gosh, I love baking, I think I want to be a cookbook writer, I want to write books about baking. No. I didn't even know what I was doing there, except that I was having a really good time learning a lot about butter, sugar, and flour, and like enjoying kind of the process of all of that. But then these guys started writing books. They started asking me to help them with their books. One thing led to another, and I ended up working with some of an agent that they worked with, and that's sort of how that first book I wrote in 2015, Icebox Cakes, came to be. Just sort of, I mean, yes, hard work, but really, to be honest, a lot of luck. And I got very lucky and wrote that book with another person whose idea it was. It was not my idea, although I love an icebox cake. And I'm gonna be brief because I do want to get to my strawberry sheet cake. But essentially, my icebox cake book is, even though an icebox cake is a really simple, easy peasy recipe, and I have a few of them in this cookbook, my icebox cake book is kind of tricky and complicated because every single component of every single icebox cake is homemade. So
Wow.
you're making cookies and you're making pudding and you're making whipped cream and caramel and ganache, and it just can be a tiny bit tedious for those of us that like to think of ourselves as snackable bakers or easy peasy bakers. So long story short, although that cookbook really speaks to me because I adore an icebox cake, the assembly and the methodology is a little more complicated than I like. And then the Vintage Baker was a book based on kind of my love of old-fashioned recipes, and sort of everything I make, even the stuff in this book. I'm kind of an old school sweets kind of person, peep. Those are the kinds of recipes I like. I'm not so interested in trying to do something new and different that's never been done before. I'm more about looking at the classics and figuring out how to twist and tweak them. And with that, I think I will start to make this cake. Now, please bear with me because I do not know if you can tell, but probably you can. I'm sitting at a table and I don't usually mix cake batter while sitting at a table. So we'll see how I do. But anyway, I have a big glass bowl, which I always love. I highly recommend, if you like to bake, getting something like this. This is probably Pyrex. It is, because I'm a big fan of one's microwave. And many of my recipes begin with melting butter. Sometimes they begin with melting chocolate. And if you have a bowl like this and you have a microwave, I like to be able to melt the butter right in here or melt the chocolate right in here, pull it out of the microwave, and then continue with the assembly. Because when I am not referring to myself as a snackable baker, I am referring to myself as a one bowl baker, which I really, really love and believe in. So first things first, I have my special bowl and I'm going to add some oil. I like to make cakes with both melted butter, and now I'm going to add some sugar. I like to make cakes with both melted butter and with oil, a little bit of vanilla. And when I say a little, I really mean a lot because I'm obsessed with vanilla, and I like to think of myself as being very vanilla forward. So I add a lot of vanilla.
Does the vanilla not make it vanilla-y, or does it make it more vanilla-y?
Well, I have to tell you, it does make it vanilla-y, but not like, oh my gosh, is this a vanilla cake or a strawberry cake? It does bring a lot of vanilla vibes to this cake, but it also, I feel like vanilla brings out, just like salt brings out all the other flavors, I feel like a little bit of vanilla brings out all the other flavors. So in this particular cake, I feel like that vanilla not only gives this like plush, moist crumb of the cake, this nice vanilla vibe, but I also think it plays beautifully with the strawberries. And I was saying that I like to use either melted butter or oil when I make cakes and even when I make cookies, because I'm trying at all costs to avoid my stand mixer, because I'm very against, in this particular book, using pieces of extraneous equipment that you, or not even extraneous, using pieces of equipment that you maybe don't need to use. So I try to develop recipes, particularly in this book, for cakes, cookies, etc., brownies, that don't require you to pull out a stand mixer. None of the recipes in this book will require you to cream butter. They might require you to do so if you're making a buttercream frosting, because I am not only vanilla forward, but I'm very buttercream forward. But that's the only time. I'm not going to say, time to make cookies, soften your butter and put it in a stand mixer. Not going to happen. Okay, now I'm going to add my eggs. I have 3 eggs, and I like to add them one at a time, just so that I make sure that they're really well incorporated into my sugar and my oil and my vanilla. And at this stage of the game, we're not so worried about, you know, you'll often, when you're making a cake, you'll see an instruction about, you know, being gentle because you don't want to overwork the flour and overwork the gluten in your recipe, particularly with cakes. At this stage in the game, you can be kind of aggressive. You don't have to worry about overmix. Oops. So I just put in 2 at a time. Please don't get angry. That was a little mistake. But at this stage of the game, we don't have to worry too much about incorporating our eggs or any of these ingredients in an overly aggressive manner. We can kind of go to town and be just as aggressive as you want to be. That can be nice. You know, people say baking can be very meditative, but maybe it's also an opportunity to get out some, I don't know, something that's not feeling very meditative inside of you. I'm not saying that's ever happened to me, I'm just saying it's a possibility.
And
So
room temperature is the word for your eggs? I mean, you always use a room temperature egg.
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie, and now I'm going to add some milk. There are a couple of recipes in my book that actually don't call for room temperature eggs. And when I do that, and now I'm just going to suggest that you mix a little bit more gently just because you don't want to splatter yourself with milk. There are a couple of recipes that don't call for room temperature eggs, and that's because I have a couple of cookie recipes, and I want those cookies to be thick and chewy because that's my favorite kind of cookie. But I don't want there to be, but I don't want the cookies to spread in the oven. Often you get a thick and chewy cookie if you let your cookie dough rest in the refrigerator for a long time. That's a trick for a very, very tasty, very chewy cookie. But I didn't want to make anybody rest their dough while they were making recipes from this book, because this book is about immediate gratification, in case you did not know. Okay, it's like, I want to eat something sweet. I think I'm going to do it right now. Okay, that's the vibe of the book. So for a couple of my cookie recipes, I actually call for cold eggs, because I want to keep the cookie dough as cool as possible, so that when it goes into the oven, it doesn't immediately spread out and get kind of thin and crispy and not what we're after at all. And if you use a cold egg when and you know, like I said before, many of my cookie recipes have either oil or melted butter or even shortening. Please don't get upset, but it's true. Those are all things that I like to use to try to keep my cookies thick and chewy, but also easy. So I don't want you to pull out that stand mixer and cream your butter for your cookie, even though that might stop it from spreading. Instead, I want you to use cold eggs to stop it from spreading. Or at least that's the thinking in my crazy brain, in case you guys were wondering. Okay, we have all of our wet ingredients. Now we're going to do something super cool. Often when you see, these are all like in case you did not know, peeps, these are my tips and tricks for easy peasy baking. So besides melted butter and oil and things like that, the other thing I like to do is, many recipes will begin with grab a bowl, put in your flour, put in your leavening, put in your salt, grab your whisk it, put that bowl aside. Now begin with the rest of the recipe. I like to avoid that bowl and that whole whisking situation with those dry ingredients. And the way I do that is I put my wet ingredients together in this bowl. I grab my leavening. In this case, it is a tablespoon of baking powder, and I whisk it right into the wet ingredients. Another reason, not only am I saving myself having to use that bowl, and I also have some salt. I'm going to do the same thing with the salt. So I do this not only because now I didn't have to use an extra bowl, but the other brilliant thing about this is I can really aggressively whisk the leavening and the salt into this wet ingredient to make sure that it's totally dispersed and distributed and exactly the way I want it. When you add your leavening and flour at the end of the recipe, you have to be super gentle, because you do not want to overwork the flour. On the other hand, you want to be super thorough, because you do not want to leave clumps of baking powder or clumps of soda. When you haven't properly distributed your leavening into your batter, you'll see holes in your cake. We call them tunnels. You'll see little tunnels in your cake. And that's an indication that the baking soda or the baking powder wasn't properly distributed. So the beauty of this is I'm properly distributing it, but I can do so aggressively, and I don't have to worry about overworking my flour, because I haven't added it yet. But I'm going to do that now. So here we go. So I'm adding the flour now. And now I can be super, super gentle, which I want to be, because I want to have this like plush, delicious, moist cake with this beautiful crumb. I can be super gentle now, because I don't have to worry about making sure that my leavening and my salt are distributed, because they were already distributed. So that's another little trick. And Holly's nodding, which makes me feel good.
Well, I'm just thinking that you may not have enjoyed being a lawyer, but you certainly draw on evidence that you've learned in your investigations. and you put them to work and share them with us. This is all great to know.
Oh, good. Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny writing this book because, of course, I kind of just for myself have all these tips and tricks that I kind of use to, make sure that my bakes are easy and work out the way that I want them to work out. But in writing, the beginning of the book has a lot of these tips and tricks listed and explained. And in writing all that, I was like, oh, wow, there's actually a lot here to share. Which I wasn't super aware of kind of when I wasn't thinking about them, like, what can I share with people? I was just like, oh, I better write down what I did so people understand it. So that was kind of a cool realization that people would be kind of excited by these tips and tricks that I've picked up over the years to try to streamline my baking.
The first 17 pages of the book is tips and ideas and examples of how to use things and substitutions. We like that a lot.
Yep, I know. People love to substitute. I won't lie. I don't always love it when people substitute, but I try to be enthusiastic. Sometimes the things they want to substitute, I do not think are a good idea, but again, I try to be enthusiastic. I'm just going to clean off my workspace so that I can, and by clean off my workspace, I mean put things on the floor, so don't get upset, peeps, but that's what's happening. All right, now I'm pulling back my batter, and I have my pan right here, and I am going to transfer. Let me see the best way to do this so you guys can see. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's just great.
Good. Oh, good. So I'm going to transfer my batter. You can see it's a teeny bit lumpy, which is totally fine. Some people get worried and think lumps are a mistake. I mean, sometimes you can run into trouble with lumps and you'll have like a little pocket of flour. But in this particular cake, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Most of the time, the liquid works through the lumps and incorporates any extra dry matter in there.
Exactly. Exactly. As it bakes up. And now the fun part, since this is, after all, a strawberry cake, I'm going to sprinkle. It's a lot of strawberries. It's an entire 16 ounces, an entire pound, but I'm just going to sprinkle them over the cake. I kind of do this a little haphazardly, as it were. I just kind of want the top covered, and I kind of, the look is like, a rustic, whatever those adjectives are that people like to use to make it seem like you didn't plan it. That's what I'm trying to say here. So I just kind of toss them on and don't really worry about it too much. And even though I'm talking a lot, I hope you guys are recognizing how fast this cake comes together, because literally I would posit, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes. What do you think? 8 minutes, 7?
Yeah.
It's really, really fast assembly. And what I love about it is the strawberries are so pretty that we don't even, there's no frosting on this cake. There's no nothing, but I do have like a secret ingredient that I like, or a secret trick ingredient that I like to use on a cake like this. I like to do this on a loaf cake as well. This is sugar in the raw, or turbinado sugar. Nice. And it adds this wonderful sparkle and this wonderful crunch to the top of the cake. And so I just sprinkle it on, and I won't lie, I'm extremely generous, and I highly recommend that you are too. And I just sprinkle this all over the strawberries, and obviously it's hitting the cake as well, because there's little spots in between the strawberries. And it just, like I said, it brings this wonderful sparkle, it brings this wonderful crunch, and I love the way it looks, and I love it texturally, and I won't lie, I love the way it tastes. So it kind of, it's doing 3 things here, and just gonna get a little closer. I don't think I can. I'd love to show you what it looks like on top, but it looks pretty good. But I am gonna show you, and that's it, peeps. Then this is going into a 350-degree oven. I can't exactly remember how much time I say, probably around 50 minutes. I could actually check myself.
No, I got the book here.
55 to 60. And again, you can see it there, and you can kind of see the sparkle around the strawberries. And then I'm going to show you.
It cooks up really fast. Jessie, I'm really impressed.
Thank you. And here you can see the finished cake. I don't
Oh,
want it to fall into my computer, but it gets this, or maybe that's a good way to do it.
oh
It
yeah,
gets
that's
this really
beautiful.
pretty
Yeah.
sparkly top. You can see the berries they get super jammy in this
Yeah.
really delicious way. I'm also gonna cut a piece so you guys can see the crumb
There's a
because I
little
do think,
crown of
okay.
crusty sugar on top, which is perfect.
Yes. And look, oh gosh. I mean, I don't want to brag, peeps, but can you see that? That's like a beautiful crumb. There are no tunnels. It's like almost this yellow hue from the yolks. Oh, it's
Oh,
just perfect and delicious, if you ask me. Perfect for Memorial Day barbecue, perfect for July 4th, perfect for all the summer holidays. And even though I hate substitutions, let's say it's the fall and you want an apple cake or you want a pear cake. You could really substitute any fruit for the berries. Chopped apples would be amazing. I don't even think you need to peel them. Same thing with pears. You want to do a different fruit in the middle of the summer. Raspberries would be delicious. Blackberries would be delicious. Strawberry, any berry, mixed berry.
rhubarb would be too weird.
Rhubarb would be delicious, I think. Yeah, I think rhubarb would be great. Or you could do strawberry and rhubarb. That would be delicious. I love rhubarb so much. Thank you for reminding me about rhubarb, Holly. I
Yeah,
forgot.
It's in my yard waiting for me.
And I have some other desserts that I wanted to share with Pete. Should I do that now? What do you think, Holly?
I think so. I think since we're not waiting any longer for the cake to come out of the oven, yeah, let's.
Yep, we don't need to wait. And that would be a bummer if we did, because that would take a really long time. And everybody would probably leave and go to bed.
And so, but Jessie, I will say, in the interest of full disclosure, we can tell people that since you flew out to LA this morning, you actually carried the cake on the plane.
100% true, Pete. I literally carried the cake on the plane, as well as 2 other desserts I'm about to share with you. I was the bag lady with all the desserts, and someone when we were in the jetway, getting on the plane, not tapped me on the shoulder, which is not very COVID safe, but I was okay with it. And she said, I can't believe you brought food on the plane. I didn't know you were allowed to do that. And I thought, that's interesting that you wouldn't know that. But I said, absolutely, you can totally bring food on the plane. Do not be upset. But I did tell her that I have some fudge here that I'm going to share with you guys.
Yeah.
This fudge didn't cause me any problems today, but I have brought chocolate fudge in a huge block on a plane and had security get very upset. I think they thought I was bringing a brick onto the plane or something.
Yeah.
But I then explained it was chocolate, and then everything was okay. But I want to show you this incredible fudge I have right here. I dog-eared the page because I'm so unbelievably organized. Dun, da, da, da. So I call this fudge Sparkle Plenty Peanut Butter Marshmallow Fudge.
Wow.
Now, I get it. That might not be for everyone, because not everyone perhaps grew up in Massachusetts and loved a fluffer nutter sandwich growing up. But I did, and that would be peanut butter, preferably Skippy, on Wonder Bread with marshmallow fluff on the other bread, and you put it together, eat it, amazing. So this is kind of my love letter to a marshmallow fluff sandwich. This is a super easy, delicious, creamy peanut butter fudge. If you like peanut butter, but you do not like marshmallows, you could leave them out. You could even put chocolate chips in instead of the marshmallows, and then you would have like a chocolate chip peanut butter situation happening, which would be amazing. On this fudge too, just so you guys can see, I put a little turbinado sugar, that sugar raw, because I'm not kidding, I put it everywhere. And I put salt on top because I want the salt to kind of cut the sweetness of this fudge. And I also have peanuts in here. So the other thing you could do is just leave out the marshmallows and you would just have this delicious creamy peanut butter fudge. And what's fun about the fudge, and I also have a chocolate fudge in the book, a salty snack fudge, which I'm going to show you because why not? What's fun about these fudges in my book is that they do not require a candy thermometer. They are fudge that you make with sweetened condensed milk. Look at that. That's my salty sweet fudge, salty snack fudge. I don't even know my own recipe names. And that fudge has pretzels and potato chips in it, and is delicious. So I highly recommend it. And then I have this fudge that came on the airplane with me, all the way from Brooklyn. And then I have this, which is a little hard for me to show you, but I'm going to show you a picture. So this is my hazelnut brittle with chocolate drizzle. And can I just give a shout out for my photographer? Nico Skinko is an incredible photographer, and he photographed this book, and the pictures are really beautiful. But anyway, this is my hazelnut brittle. I'm going to show you a piece with some chocolate drizzle on top. It is, I'm obsessed with hazelnuts. I don't know about you guys. Hazelnuts are like one of my, if not my favorite nut. And this brittle has big chunks of hazelnuts. It's kind of toasty and very salty, but in a good way. Don't get scared. The brittle itself obviously is like this, cooked sugar toffee situation made with brown sugar, I believe. I hope I'm not wrong. Should I check? It's not good when you don't remember your own recipe. I was wrong. Granulated sugar.
I was gonna say it must be brown sugar, but you're right.
And then this chocolate drizzle is kind of a cool, often when you put a drizzle on a candy like this, when the weather gets warm, the chocolate will melt. And so professional candy makers do something called tempering, where they change the nature of the chocolate to such a way that it won't melt on a warm day. In my book, I have a little hack or a little trick for kind of it's like a tempering trick that allows you to put this chocolate on top of this brittle and not have it melt even on an airplane for 6 hours.
Wow.
And then the final recipe that I wanted to share with you guys, which is extremely near and dear to my heart. They really need their moment in the sun. So these are my Rice Krispie treats. I would argue maybe the best you've ever had. Here's a cool picture of them in the book. They're like a whole tower of Rice Krispies. And this is also a cool picture. That's the entire Rice Krispie pulled from the pan on my friend Katie, who is my food stylist, on her hand.
Why do you get them so mile high?
Yeah, they're mile high because they're made in an 8x8 by 2 inch pan. So they're made in a smaller pan as opposed to a 13 by 9 by 2 inch pan. I love the height. Check that out.
Yeah.
I also love marshmallow blobs, melty blobs of marshmallows. So I not only melt the marshmallows, but I also put marshmallows in at the end into the mixture so that you get those pockets of marshmallow. I also do have you brown the butter in this recipe, which sounds fussy, and you might be screaming right now on the Zoom. You said this was an easy peasy baking book. Brown butter isn't easy. I'm leaving, but let me explain it to you. And I feel you. But in this situation, I browned the butter because you're melting it anyway. And then to bring it to brown is maybe 2 minutes more, maybe 3 minutes more. And I feel like we easy peasy snackable bakers can do an extra 2 to 3 minutes for some brown butter. I do feel like that's okay. So that's why I did it, in case you were wondering. And then finally, I have a secret ingredient in my Rice Krispie treats, which is sweetened condensed milk. And when you add that with the butter and with the marshmallows and you melt those all together, you just get this incredible kind of creamy toastiness. These creamy toasty notes are added to the Rice Krispie treats. Plus they stay soft. Sometimes with Rice Krispie treats, they can get kind of crispy and hard, they can get kind of hard, maybe on day 2, maybe even end of day 1. These stay soft and moist and toothsome for days. So, and the combination of the flavor and texture that they bring to Rice Krispie treats, I implore you to give them a try if you are even a little bit Rice Krispie treat forward and think that you might enjoy them, because I really think you will.
Plus it sounds to me like between the brown butter and the sweetened condensed milk, there's maybe perhaps a complexity to them that was not in our mom's Rice Krispie treats when we were little.
Okay. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. Wow. Huh.
So those are the recipes. I did not travel with these. Karen made these for me in LA, which was very nice of her. But the rest of the things I traveled with, and I'm very impressed. I guess one thing I should say about this strawberry cake is it travels well. So not only is it the perfect dessert for July 4th or Memorial Day or any kind of celebration like that, or in the fall, I think this would be beautiful on a Thanksgiving dessert spread made with apples or pears. But also if you have to travel to Thanksgiving or travel to Memorial Day barbecue or travel to July 4th festivities, fireworks celebration, etc., I highly suggest you make this cake. here's what I did in case you're curious. I made the cake. Then I let it cool to room temperature. Then I froze it on a sheet pan with like a piece of parchment paper underneath it. Then once it was frozen, took it out with the parchment paper still underneath it. I wrapped it in saran wrap, and then I wrapped it in tin foil, and I shoved it back in the freezer. And I don't want you guys to get upset, but I did not make it like yesterday.
No,
Okay,
the freezing puts
it's
it
been
into.
there for a little while. So that's the other beautiful thing that people don't always realize about a lot, not only a lot of desserts in my book, but a lot of desserts in general. You can make them ahead, can freeze them, and when you defrost them, they taste, as fresh and delicious as if you made them that day. Because you're, like they do with frozen berries, they're locking in all of the freshmen. I have a freshman in college, hence he's on my mind. You're locking in all the freshness of the berries or of the cake. It's at its most moist and perfect, and you freeze it. Then it's still going to be moist and perfect when you pull it out. Travel to LA with it, and then show it off on a Zoom. In case those are the kinds of things you like to do.
It sounds like this is right up your alley, that making a cake and then getting on a plane with it. But and I just have to ask. I mean, I sense your enjoyment of all these things that you have so much fun making, hoping you have children at home to help to enjoy them with you. But it sounds like
I do, but they're very, don't get me wrong, I definitely love them, but they are, and my older son, actually, they're both very supportive and enthusiastic-ish, but they are not the kids who are like, oh, Mom, will you make homemade cookies? Or, oh, Mom, get any homemade cake? They're like, oh, Mom, we need more Ben and Jerry's. Oh, Mom, we need
Oreos.
more Oreos.
Yeah.
So they're not, I wouldn't say it's top of their list, but their friends appreciate me. Their friends love me.
I am sure.
So for that, I think they love me too, because I'm very popular when their friends come over. The question, what's in the freezer, Mom? What can we eat? Then they send me pictures from their phone. Can we eat this? Can we eat that? Is this for me?
Yeah, I'm sure it's you really are if there's a decision to be made about whose house to go to, yours house always wins.
I think it does.
Yeah.
I think it does.
Yeah.
I'm not only the cool mom, I'm the baking cool mom.
Yeah. No, I get that. And it's I'm sure you're popular, and you must have a pretty there was a story about your kitchen in a magazine, I think. About your kitchen in Brooklyn.
Yes, maybe it was once featured in Martha Stewart, and it was once featured in Dwell magazine.
Dwell was
yeah.
Looked terrifically cool.
Oh, thank you.
But so how do you tie together part of what, I mean, the book itself is lovely. If any, I mean, I've got the library copy, but I had promised to give it back so people can check it out. And I'm probably gonna have to get a copy on August 5th when you're here for our book signing.
Yay!
But how did you get your inspiration for, I mean, I love the concept of one dish cooking, because it's not something I do readily. Unfortunately, my operating philosophy involves getting as many things. I got a lot of dishes, and they're generally all over the kitchen and need to be washed. How do you, I'm just curious about tying together, obviously, your love of your mother's cooking when you were a youngster with the vintage cooking, and how that sort of things that you learned as a kid and as an eater of your mother's cooking, how that is leads to the creative process that brings us to Snackable Bakes.
Yeah, so I may have misled you, because my mother was not a cook. Okay. So the vintage baker was more just being inspired by these kinds of desserts, not even sure where I was eating them. I mean, my mother-in-law was definitely raising my husband with all those things. And when I joined the family, I learned a ton from her about those kinds of desserts and making them and ideas for them. But I think, well, it began with just this voracious sweet tooth that I think I've described, where I loved sweets so much, it never even occurred to me that I should be baking them. I just was more than happy to be purchasing them or having someone else make them for me. But when I kind of transitioned into making them myself, it took a little while. Like I think I said in the beginning, for me to realize that, yeah, I love baking, but maybe the kind I love the most is the easiest kind. Like the things that really speak to me are those things that can be assembled quickly. For whatever reason, I'm not the person, like I call it project baking. I'm not a project baker. I don't think it's thing to wake up on Saturday morning and want croissant and then eat them 3 days later. Or even sourdough. I did join the sourdough parade, and I do enjoy making sourdough, but in general, I don't like things that take a long time. I'm a very, I won't lie, I'm an impatient person, not patient person. And it appeals to me to be able to put together something really tasty and fun really quickly.
Yeah.
And that was my goal for this book, the idea that, snacking cakes have been kind of having a moment for a couple of years, and I adore snacking cakes and have made them forever. But the idea that why should like snacking cakes have all the fun?
Right.
Like, why can't we have all different kinds? Why can't pie be easy? And the pie recipe in my book is made with a melted butter crust. And that recipe is available on Bon Appetit right now. If you have not purchased my book yet and you're wondering if you should, maybe make that recipe and see what you think.
Yeah, that's the, is that the raspberry? That's the raspberry pie.
Yes, it's a crumb-topped raspberry pie with easiest ever crust.
Yeah.
A galette too, that's super easy with that same melted butter kind of press-in crust situation. But I think it was just a realization that, yes, I love sweets. I mean, maybe not more than my own children, but a lot. And that if you can make them quickly, why not do that? At least for me, that's what is appealing to me. Not that I don't want to go to someone's house and have them present me with some project bake that they've worked on. I will totally, I'm so supportive. I can't wait to see, I can't wait to eat, but that's just not where you're going to find me. And I think it was just over time kind of realizing that I liked the project bakes up until a point, but they weren't really going to do it for me. What I really wanted was to be able to make a lot of things kind of on the quick side, a lot of delicious things, but much more quickly. And I also think, just thinking of this out loud now, but I'm not sort of the queen of making things look beautiful. Like, I'm not the person who's going to pull out all of her different piping tips and, pipe beautiful things on top of a layer cake, or that's just not my jam. I'm much more like what we were saying before, like rustic, like a cake like this, that's just a little bit simpler. Not that I don't go in for a buttercream frosting, but I'm much more likely to do it on a sheet cake like this than I am to, make a layer cake, frost each one, put on a crumb coat, maybe put a simple syrup on top to make it extra moist. I used to do that. It just doesn't appeal to me anymore. So I think that may be also why I'm less of a project baker, because I'm less interested in kind of the look at this impressive, beautiful thing I made, or this impressive thing that took so many hours to make. Look what I did. It's that I'm much more like, look what I did. It took 20 minutes.
Yeah, let's eat. Terrific. No, that's a great, your evolution is a very interesting story in itself. And Michael saved me from, I was about to ask the audience to see what kind of questions they had. And so we've got one from Michael's iPad, and which I'll share, but please, other bakers or baking questions, or even, questions about bigger issues in life, whatever. But so Michael's question is, in my house, a cake without frosting gets a chilly reception. Did you mention that you believe strongly in buttercream? Does the book include frosted cake recipes?
100%, including a really epic banana snacking cake with a chocolate malted cream cheese frosting.
Ooh.
I'll try and find that for you, Michael. And that is on King Arthur baking website right now. So again, for those in the house who are still on the fence, I can't remember.
Page 51.
Oh, I love you. You're so fast, Holly.
I'm so hungry.
You're on the fence, Michael, about purchasing. Check out this cake on King Arthur's baking site. That was the first recipe from the book to be out in the public. But that's a really easy banana snacking cake. So not like a banana loaf, but like a banana cake in an 8x8 by 2-inch pan with this delicious but super easy chocolate malted cream cheese frosting. That's an example where I am going to ask you to pull out the stand mixer to make that frosting, because I want you to cream that butter and that cream cheese together. But and there's cocoa powder in it, but it's like a spectacularly delicious and super easy easy peasy, if I do say so myself, cake. And yes, Michael, there's also like, there's like a Black Forest snacking cake that has like this kind of whipped cream cherry situation on top. I have a pumpkin cake with a chocolate frosting on top. Well, then I have some glazes. I wonder what kind of reception glazes get in your house, but I have like this really delicious almond olive oil snacking cake. It's a little round 9-inch cake. I can try and find it.
It's page 138, actually.
Oh my God,
You're
Holly!
looking.
You are
I'm really
incredible.
getting hungry. Yeah.
Holly and I are taking it on the road. Because she
Just a
supplies me.
prompter. Yeah.
But this is a really delicious cake with a chocolate almond glaze. It's just made with almond milk, and then an almond olive oil flavored cake. So yes, Michael, do not worry. There's this cake that doesn't have frosting, the strawberry one, and then there's also a pear sour cream snacking cake that doesn't have frosting. But I think other than that, do not worry. Who do you think you're dealing with? Of course, there is frosting.
And the response, I think, is terrific for a library event. Thanks, they say. Who could be on the fence about purchasing a book? Not having all of your books would be like not having all of Proust. That is wonderful. This is great.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So other questions or thoughts or perhaps literary allusions to share with Jessie? I know that I assume many of us that are here do it because we are here because we enjoy not just a good cookbook, but hearing people's stories about both their creative process and ways that it can affect your own kind of style.
And while we wait for questions, I can talk more about one thing that I think I have found that people find interesting is learning about the cookbook writing process and how this book came to be. And this book was actually written very quickly because it sort of had to be produced within a year, which is completely unheard of in the cookbook world. Cookbooks usually take at least 2 years. So I basically signed a contract to write this book last May, and now the book is already in the world.
Wow.
And I knew that I wanted to have 100 recipes, and I knew that I wanted to have a photograph for every recipe. So those were two kind of goals, primary, wants that I had for this book. And the way it works with your publisher, or at least the way it worked with mine, they don't care what you do. They're going to give you an advance and you can use it as you will. So I used mine essentially to make sure that I got a photograph for every recipe, because that is very expensive. Most people don't.
Yeah.
When you see a book that doesn't have that, that's usually because of price. Or cost, or how expensive it is to do that. Because I think we can all agree, in general, people kind of eat with their eyes, and I know myself, when the recipes don't have pictures, yes, sometimes a whimsical name or something about the name draws me in. But in general, I know for instance, The Vintage Baker, my second book, I know there are plenty of recipes in there that I think are fabulous that no one is ever making, because they just don't know. They can't imagine what it's going to look like, because that book is full of, recipes with whimsical names, because they're all these old-fashioned desserts. Yeah. And many of them happen to have these whimsical names, but I do think it makes a big difference. So I basically spent last summer, well, the first thing I do, which I think a lot of cookbook writers do, the first thing I do, because you kind of have to give it to your publisher, is I wrote a table of contents. So before I even have any of the recipes, I write up a list of 100 things that I want to eat. And I try to divide them by cake, cookie, confection, so that we have some variety. Breakfast, so that they're kind of divided up in these categories. And then I fill in the categories with 100 recipes. And, it's so funny when your editor at your publishers is looking at your table. Oh, that is so delicious. I can't wait to try that. And I feel like saying, me too, because I haven't tried it. I made it up, but I haven't made it yet. So the first thing I do is just come up with names of things that sound delicious to me. And then the next step I do, some people do that, and then they go chapter by chapter. So then they say, okay, this is the table of contents. Today I'm going to make all the cakes. I don't do it that way. I basically go through the list and just make every single thing one at a time until I get through that entire list. I can't, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Some people take their table of contents and then just take the cake chapter and develop all of those recipes and then go make them. Then they come back and they develop all the cookies and then they go make them. I don't work like that. I'm a very like black and white person. I'm a very rigid person. I was like, this is the table of contents. I need to develop every single recipe right now. So my first step is to go through the entire table of contents and write a recipe for each of those titles that I came up with. Do they all work? Probably not, but at least I've put down on paper what the ingredients are and what the instructions are for making it. Then once I've done every single recipe, so I can say to myself, okay, I still only have I have so little time to do this, but at least I have a recipe for every single thing that's going to be in this book. So that's my second thing that's a little bit different than what most cookbook writers do. I develop every single recipe first. Then I go back and do chapter by chapter. And I won't lie, sometimes you come to a recipe that you've written and it just doesn't work and you rework the entire thing. But sometimes it does work, or sometimes it's not perfect, but it's tweakable. So I just find that really comforting. It's like, I think it's probably like the same reason I love a list. Like when I know in my head I have all these things to do, but they haven't been put on a piece of paper, I can't tell you the agita I have. But once it's written down, I'm like, oh, okay, now we just go through and we'll cross things off. So I think for me, developing every single recipe is kind of the same idea.
A sense of satisfaction from getting the list completed.
100%.
Yeah.
And then in addition, my editor came up with this great idea, which was rather than separate the book by cakes, cookies, confections, why not separate it by a flavor? So she had me do a vanilla chapter, a chocolate chapter, a spicy chapter, a salty sweet chapter, and a nut chapter. And I think that ended up being a really cool way to divide up the book, and also a way that people can be like, oh, in terms of a craving, it's nice because it's not like I'm craving a cake. It's like, oh, I'm craving something salty, or I'm craving something with nuts in it, or it's like, oh my God, the produce is amazing right now. I'm craving something fruity. So I think that's nice as well.
And here's another question from Michael's iPad that's asked, roughly how many revisions does a recipe go through before you call it right? How many other people do you have test your recipes before you publish them? And so, can we get on the list for next time? That's where I added myself.
So for my first two books, I just kind of, anybody and everybody, I wanted them to test a recipe. I thought it would be kind of a great way to do it, because if you're asking just a regular old home cook to test a recipe, they're the people that are going to be making the recipes eventually. So what better person to test it? I have since learned that you can learn so much from having somebody for this book. I hired a tester. I hired somebody who worked with me at my first job at the bakery, who has a much more sophisticated palate than me, is much more talented than me. And therefore, every single thing I made, if Stephanie liked it, and I named the snickerdoodles after her, if Stephanie liked it, I knew it was going to be great, because she's much pickier than I am, and just much more, for lack of a better word, sophisticated. So this time it was amazing to work with somebody who knows everything there is to know about baking and developing and all of that. And so was really a collaboration. So I could send her something and say, well, I think probably you're going to add more sugar to the banana cake, right? And she'd be like, absolutely not. I'm pulling back on the sugar. So it was like a great coming together of two very different people. I feel like she kept me real. She kept me not too sweet. I can be a little on the sweet side. In more ways than one. And she was great at, just like a great balance for me. So in this instance, Michael, I had one person test every single recipe, and she and I would go back and forth and test, I would say, almost everything multiple times. There might be a recipe or two that was just so good when I made it, and then I gave it to Stephanie and it was so good that she made it, that maybe we made it once more and called it a day. And then at the photo shoot, everything is getting made again. So that's another opportunity for a lot of different people to be tasting things. You're not changing a ton. I didn't rework any recipes then, but it was helpful to have them. It's helpful to have people baking them and have us photographing them and me being able to see how people were responding to them.
Sure, a little tweaking.
Yeah, totally. So for this particular book, I changed course and just hired a tester to work with me. There's one recipe in the book for the blackberry lemon yogurt loaf. For whatever friggin' reason, that was the hardest recipe in the book. I couldn't get it right. I didn't want the blackberries to sink. I had to figure out how to get all the flavor that I wanted and all of the texture and all of the moisture in that loaf with blackberries that did not sink. I think I succeeded, but I did send that recipe out to, I think Stephanie did it, I did it, and I think at least 3 other people did it. So that recipe was tested by the most people because I wanted it. And at the end of the process, a young woman, as the kids say, slid into my DMs, which means someone I didn't know DM'd me on Instagram and said, I'm graduating from cooking school and I would love to help you with your cookbook. And I took a chance and worked with her, and she was amazing. And she tested a bunch of things that Stephanie, either was moving on to a different recipe, but we didn't feel it was quite right, or just I wanted another person's opinion. As much as I love Stephanie, I just wanted to see what it did in a different oven. And so that person, another Stephanie, because I only work with Stephanie, that's a joke. Another person helped me as well towards the end.
So Jessie, this has just been just quite amazing about both the things that come out and what you produced and how you produced them and all the various ingredients and processes. I was just about to ask if there's other places around the area where people will be able to see you and enjoy some time with you and some of your recipes. And maybe you can tell us about other opportunities in our area.
Yes, I can. So first of all, I think that you put in the chat the schedule, Holly. So in the chat is a list of all of my events, and many of them are in the Sharon-ish area.
Oh, apologies. We put the link for the Hillsdale one in.
Okay, perfect.
And I'll put the other one up at the end with everything.
Okay, perfect. So at the end, Holly will put up like just a little picture of all of the events.
Yep. And I can send it out afterwards also.
Perfect. But on over Memorial Day weekend, I'm going to be at Field and Supply, which is like a maker's fair in Kingston, New York. And I'm going to be signing books and probably demoing something. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be. And then on June 4th, I'm going to be at the Hillsdale Cooking Store. I'm probably bastardizing the name, so apologies.
Hillsdale General Store. I think
Hillsdale General Store. And I'll be teaching a baking class on Saturday, June 4th at 1 o'clock. And we will bake I think it's about 4 or 5 different things from the book, including a galette and just some other things that are just perfect for spring, etc. And yes, the recipes are easy. So you might be thinking, oh, I don't need to take a baking class. I know how to bake. But again, there are tips and tricks and different things that I will share that you might find interesting. And then I'm also going to be at the Rhinebeck Farmers Market with Oblong Books. I believe that's the following weekend, maybe on Saturday, June 12th. And then I have a variety of virtual things scattered throughout the summer, including being back at Hotchkiss Library for the author evening in the beginning of August. I think it's like August 4th.
August 5th. August 5th.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, my list didn't really share quite correctly, but I will send it out to everybody.
Thank you.
So you're out and about in a lot of different places, and I'm sorry we didn't have more time to talk about. I was curious about what brought you here to Sharon and sort of where you always see you and your recipes going next, but we can save that for another time, and perhaps of the book signing itself. So
sounds great. Sounds great.
I can't thank you enough. It was just really a lot of fun, and you really. I know you're going to have a great time out there on the West Coast demonstrating and sharing some of this kind of stuff, and hopefully not bringing anything back on the plane.
I know. I hope so too. I don't know what I'm doing with all this stuff though.
Oh, I bet you could just find a few friends. Oh, that looks just really amazing. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in August. And anybody